Well, hello. My name is Angel Wood, and this is Crime of the Truest Kind. Well, it has been a fun-filled couple of weeks in my world, and, well, a fun-filled couple of weeks in terms of crime in Massachusetts, my home state. Fun isn't really the appropriate word here, though. Well, it is in terms of the music festival that I have been fully engrossed in, buried almost entirely. And yes, I'm sorry to say that Crime of the Truest Kind has suffered as a result of focusing almost all of my waking energy into these 9 nights of live music. The Rock and Roll Rumble concludes Saturday night, May 4th at Sonia in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's something that I have been a part of for a very long time, and it is all associated with my rock and roll radio career. It is most definitely a very good time. When I reference Massachusetts crime in terms of current events, I'm referring to what is called everywhere as the Karen Reed trial. I don't call it that. I call it the John O'Keefe murder trial. John O'Keefe died in the snow, covered with abrasions, a foul injury to the back of his head. And I will tell you now, as I will tell you throughout this upcoming interview, I have not been following the Karen Reed / John O'Keefe case very closely because, quite frankly, it is a goddamn media circus here in Massachusetts. More so now that it's being televised. That doesn't make me feel any less compassionate for everybody involved. There's a mourning family. There are 2 kids who lost their surrogate father, and a woman on trial who may or may not be guilty for what she's being charged with. Thank you for being here. And there was a lot going on in this true crime world I now find myself a part of. And it has everything to do with advocacy here in my home state of Massachusetts. But I will tell you this, part of the advocacy that I am making time for and participating in, 2 things coming up in mid-May. On Thursday, May 16th, the family of Beth Brody, the 15-year-old girl who was murdered in Groveland, Massachusetts, by a boy with a baseball bat. It's a grim story, and I do cover it in a past episode. Beth's family is once again faced with the prospect of her killer being granted parole. We do not want that to happen. So we are mobilizing, and we will be there in full force at the parole board hearing in Natick, Massachusetts on Thursday, May 16th. The following day, Friday, May 17th, I will be a part of what is known as Missing Children's Advocacy Day, first started by the family of Molly Bish, a young woman who disappeared and whose remains were found near her home in Warren, Massachusetts. Missing Children's Advocacy Day will take place at Great Hall at the Massachusetts State House in Boston. It is open to the public. Many of my colleagues in advocacy will be there. Julie Murray is the keynote speaker at this event. Julie Murray, many of you know, is the sister of Maura Murray, who is still missing, has been missing for 20 years. The Murrays are from Massachusetts. Maura Murray grew up in Hanson, and she was a student at UMass in Amherst. And I can say this, the Murrays are massholes, just like me. I did have a laugh with Fred Murray, Mara and Julie's dad, at the vigil in February. We did laugh about being massholes. We're pretty proud of it. All of this information, of course, on these upcoming advocacy events will be posted at crimeofthetruestkind.com. And I can say this. We have put together a coalition, an advocacy coalition, to support Massachusetts families of missing and murdered loved ones. Much more information will be available about that very soon. Today's episode, episode 63, is a conversation about the John O'Keefe murder trial that got underway this week in Dedham, Massachusetts. I don't know a lot about the case. I have not been following it very closely, like a number of other people have. Maybe some of you listening today, this is the first time you've listened to Crime of the Truest Kind, because maybe you're curious what we have to say about the John O'Keefe murder trial. I talked to Dubs. Dubs is the true crime bloodhound. That is what she calls her podcast. I met Dubs at one of my live crime events, which there will be more of. Dubs has been following this story from the beginning. I remember the news reports of a man found unresponsive in the snow in Canton in January of 2022. I sort of remember the story that surrounded Karen Reed being arrested for running over John O'Keefe and leaving him to die in the snow. But we'll talk about all of that. It is a complicated case, and we are only 4 days into testimony of what will likely be 3 or 4 months at this rate. Buckle up. This is episode 63, the John O'Keefe murder trial, Canton, Massachusetts, with my guest, Dubs. I really have ignored this case for a while.
Yeah.
I'm aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's really polarizing.
Yeah. I think divisive has become like the most typed word on my phone since April. Like if you did a word cloud of my phone, it would be divisive, like huge in the middle, and everything else would be like floating around it in this little circle.
It's a phenomenon. Crime stories happen. We've had a number of them. I mean, Canton, the town of Canton is no stranger to it. A big case going back many, many years ago was this 14-year-old boy, Shawn Ouillette, who was murdered by another kid. That's such a sad story.
It is.
But so many years have transpired since then. So now the locals are like, oh, we have this other monster case facing us. You have been following this really since the beginning, would you say?
I'd say, I remember when it happened, the last day of January 29th, 2022. I remember reading in the news the day after that there was a Boston police officer that was found killed on the front lawn of another police officer's home. And then I heard when Karen was arrested, and then I didn't hear anything for over a year.
What was the time span between when John O'Keefe was found dead and when she was arrested and accused of killing him?
I believe it was only a few days. Sad part is the wealth of this conspiracy can pretty much be traced back to the way that people feel about how the police handled the investigation into John O'Keefe's death.
Who was a cop himself?
Yes, exactly. And you would think that all the T's would be double crossed, all the I's would be double dotted, in a case
Yeah.
like this. It's a cop. They're your brothers. You have to, they're the thin blue line is there for a reason. Like they protect their own, but in this case,
That's what we're taught to believe, right? We're
right?
taught to believe that this agency, they band together and take care of one another,
Yep.
but something has fallen here in Canton, Massachusetts.
Oh yeah. It was such a strange thing. She actually was arrested February 2nd. So it
Hmm.
was only 2 days, 3 days after he was found on Brian Albert's front lawn. So it's an interesting thing when you look back at it. Like everything happened very, very fast, and then nothing happened at all for almost a year.
I don't recall any information in that period of time. I don't even remember anybody talking about it or really any chatter online about it
Nope,
after that. And
not
it was like a full
until
year before they started talking about it again in the press?
not until Aiden Kearney picked it up
Uh-huh. What's his connection?
from
A
to
blogger just got some inside information?
he got a tip on the story from somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody.
Mm.
It was a friend of Karen's, had given some information to a woman local to Canton, and he took it and ran with it. So that was just about a year ago because no one cared until he picked it up.
People ask me about this case a lot because they know I'm in Massachusetts and they know I talk about crime stuff.
Mhm.
But I never really had a definitive answer about what I thought one way or the other. I
Right.
thought that it was bananas. I thought that there was this really sort of culty mentality around it.
Hmm.
I don't have any way to know whether she did it or not.
I don't think anybody does, to be honest. I think even though she's on trial right now and it's slated to be the trial, I still don't think at the end of this, regardless of what the verdict is, we're actually really going to know one way or the other.
I find it pretty unfair that, yes, I know that it's a media circus that has turned into this for the last
Yeah.
many, many months. I don't like how everybody just focuses on the way her facial expressions or her boots or how she's wearing her hair. Yeah, she's on trial. Yes, she could potentially be convicted of second-degree murder, and we're gonna talk about her fucking boots.
Yeah, we are going to talk about her boots. She dresses like a mafia don, though. Like, I don't know if you've seen the recent, I think it was like the last motion hearing they had for her. She was wearing this like black power suit with like bright gold buttons. And I was like, she's a mafia don. That's what's going on. She's sitting at the table, like, she's got her fingers just like this. I'm like, oh boy. But I mean, the facial expressions are kind of hard to let go of, considering that the mass media cameras in the courtroom are like 90% of the time just focused straight on her face.
Just to see her
And
reaction.
yeah, and she's like me. She can't, like, it seems like she doesn't know when to shut up her face. Like there's a lot of time where she'll sit there just like staring daggers at opposing counsel, and you're like, whoa, whoa, rein it in, man, rein it in. Like RBF is one thing, but you can't look so pissed in front of a jury because it's gonna
Yeah,
look bad.
it is gonna look bad for her. And I see that the O'Keefe family is, like, sitting basically next to the defense's table.
That has to do with the smaller courtroom they got for this trial. There was a motion hearing about this last week, actually, because the way that the jury is seated in Bev Cannoni's normal courtroom,
Mhm.
not every single one of them has an unobstructed view of both the witness stand and the defense table.
Mm.
So they filed a motion saying like it's her right to face her
Mhm.
accusers, and it's their right to see everything all the time. So Bev Cannoni passed the motion to move it to a smaller courtroom. And I think also it was strategic to kind of get her supporters to stay outside, for
Cases
lack
like
of a better
this
term.
always generate a lot of emotion,
They do.
and it's been building. I've even seen yard signs
Mhm.
for Karen Reed and like QR codes on the yard sign. So I don't
Oh,
know
yeah.
how many people are going to stop and click a QR code on a sign in front of somebody's house. I mean, props to you for going through all that and getting that printed up and putting that QR code on your
Oh, yeah.
street on your yard sign.
You know where that QR code goes?
No.
Turtle Boy made a video.
Well, I will say this, and this will probably anger some people, and okay, he's not a journalist. It's okay to be a writer. I mean, look, I'm not a journalist either, and I
No,
write stories about news items. I'm not a journalist. I don't call myself a journalist, but I have been a professional radio broadcaster for a number of years. That doesn't mean anything either. It just
no.
means that I can like talk into a mic and I know a lot about Soundgarden. It doesn't make me a journalist. It's interesting that this story has been able to affect people the way it has. Why do you think that is?
That's a really interesting question. It's one I ask myself a lot, actually, about this case because, I wasn't on YouTube. I wasn't doing a podcast. I wasn't public in any way before this came about. And I went to a court date in July just to see, just to be a part of this insane energy that was going on outside the courthouse. I just wanted to see. I didn't really have an opinion one way or the other. Said, why the hell not? So I showed up. I went. And that led to everything that came after as far as like my own journey in this world of broadcast, podcast, media, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And without that, I wouldn't be sitting here with you.
Oh,
But
that's
at the
really
same
interesting.
time,
So this sparks all of this
oh,
crime joy in your soul.
it just gave me a voice. You know as well as I do, there are probably hundreds, if not thousands of true crime podcasts out there.
Yes.
And it's been something of a dream of mine to be on one, to host one. It's always been something I've wanted to do. And I never had any stepping off point. I didn't want to just sit down with a microphone and go, hey, I wanted to try it with somebody else first and see where I got. And, I jumped on with Kevin Lenahan from Yellow Cottage Tales for one episode, and then I joined the show and we were off to the races. But I've met some people through this whole thing who are either ride or die, or you say the wrong thing one time and they write you off completely. I've never seen behavior like this in my life.
And it's not just people in Canton, it's
No,
people all over Massachusetts and at this point nationwide and probably worldwide because of the nature of the internet.
that in court TV.
Oh, yeah.
I got to meet Vinnie Politan last night.
Oh. Where's he hanging out?
Blue Ribbon Barbecue in Dedham.
Mhm.
And he was taping a spot with my friend Kevin. So I went down to watch them tape and I got to meet him. And I was like, I would not be standing here if this stuff never went down. This is insane.
I mean, I'll be absolutely honest. I've told you from the jump when we first met at one of my live events in Beverly.
Oh, Beverly, yeah.
We talked about that kind of briefly where, there's a vast amount of people who are, this is a cover-up. This is the Canton Cover-up. And I know that there's all these associated podcasts, streaming things popping up about, let's jump on board the Canton train. We know happens. I saw it with every single crime, big crime case that happened with the Delphi murders. It happened when Gabby Petito went. So many other cases. People jump on board. It's interesting to see somebody being outspoken about her guilt. Let's talk a little bit about that because I'm going to declare again. I don't really know where I stand on this. Is it possible she didn't do it? Yes. Is it possible she did do it? Sure. I just have to wait for them to paint the full picture for me. And I didn't watch any of the trial today. I watched
nothing was on today.
Nothing today. First day I watched Yesterday I watched some.
Mhm.
We're taping on Wednesday. There was nothing going on today.
They were not in session today.
Let me back up. There
Okay.
is a man who is dead, who has a family that misses him. The O'Keefe family has had an enormous amount of heartbreak. They have lost a sister, died, left her 2 children. Then a few months later, her husband died,
Yeah.
leave these 2 children. The O'Keefe family figures out, how are we going to take care of these kids? John O'Keefe, the man who is dead, takes guardianship of these children and becomes their substitute father.
Yeah.
So there's got to be some goodness in this man. There's got to be some goodness in this family, right? He's dating Karen Reed. From all of the accounts that I've heard to date, she was pretty good for the kids. The kids liked her. The family
Yeah.
liked her. Everybody liked her. Snowy January night in New England. It gets cold. Snow comes down at a heavy clip. It's one of those nights. They're out partying. For whatever reason, she wants to go home. He wants to go to the party. She supposedly drives him to this party in Canton. And then what the fuck happened? She she thinks that by what we've seen so far, she believes she dropped him off, left. He didn't come home. First thing in the morning, like before sunrise, she goes back to the house and they find John O'Keefe
Yep.
in the snow with what appear to be bite marks on him. No blood. Do I have that right?
There was a little bit of blood underneath him when the paramedics came and moved him. But head wounds bleed. I mean, I know, everyone knows head wounds bleed hard. And I mean, of course, the cold could have been a factor. It was very cold out that night. I believe from what I've read of the weather reports, it was like 18 degrees outside.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to aid clotting. I mean, if you're laying out in the snow with a head wound, you're not, it's going to help it clot. It's not going to gush.
Mm-hmm.
So it's seriously, it depends on what side of this you're listening to, on what day you're listening to it.
Yeah.
Because every single factor of this could go one way or the other. It's massively irritating to the way that my mind works, which is thinking up every possible scenario and then weighing in my mind, okay, what is the probability of A? Okay, higher, all right, and then B is more probable, but how, if it's possible, sure, all of these things are possible. She
Mm-hmm.
could have hit him, he could have been beaten inside the house, a plow could have hit him, it could have been unrelated to everybody. Any of these things are possible, but what is the most probable thing that happened? And but this is a nightmare for that kind of analytical thinking, because there's no, okay, well, this is more probable because XYZ, but this is equally probable because of ABC. And the more you think about it, the more tied up in knots you get. It's crazy.
And it's just this vast abyss of conspiracy, because
Yeah.
if you want to believe that the cops involved, the town cops and the state cops, if you want to believe that they were dirty in this, you're going to find some evidence that supports your own theory.
Yep. But they
And
could be not just dirty, they could just be inept.
yeah.
I mean, it could just be a simple case of drop the ball or complete ineptitude, coupled with maybe a little bit of bias towards the defendant or towards the victim. And voila, it's not a conspiracy. It's just an asshole who can't do his job correctly.
Right.
You
And
know?
they're going after the state cop
Michael Proctor.
who had shared some, I'll say, pretty ridiculous texts with some people
Oof.
about Karen Reed.
Yeah.
Like, basically the tone as I received it was like, fuck this bitch, was kind of the tone that I was getting from the text that Proctor was sending around.
Yeah. I have I had heard that he called her the C bomb,
And
and
wasn't there another text that said, "I hope she kills herself"?
yeah, yeah,
I don't know that we're ever really I don't know how long this trial is proposed to last,
6 to 8 weeks.
which is gonna be we're gonna be so tired. The jury's gonna be so tired of all of this by
I
the
think
end.
they already are. I mean, listening to the prosecutor in his opening argument, I think he put him to sleep on day one. I mean,
Yeah,
we've
it
all seen
wasn't
movies. We know what they're supposed to sound like, you know. I've
yeah,
sat in court more times than I'd like to admit, but
mhm,
that was for law school, not as a defendant. But
mhm.
I've seen some opening arguments that are engaging, and I've seen some opening arguments that are dry and boring, and his takes the cake on the dry and boring.
I
It
mean,
was
her defense attorney, Yannetti, who previously was a prosecutor, and
mhm,
I know that he was a big part of the Jeffrey Curley murder case many years ago. Jeffrey Curley is a little boy from Cambridge, Massachusetts, who was kidnapped by men from his own neighborhood and molested and murdered and thrown in a river in Maine. It's a
mhm.
horrible, horrible story. People ask me about it,
I don't like talking about that one. It
and
hurts.
it's really, really difficult because you have a little boy who this beautiful, trusting little boy just riding around his neighborhood, and these guys were not strangers to him
Yeah.
or the neighborhood. They're in prison, and they want desperately to get out. I hope they never see the light of day. Ever, 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 ever see the light of day.
No, as
But
they should.
Yannetti was when he was a prosecutor all those many years ago, I don't recall the date, but I'm gonna say 95 or maybe even sooner, or maybe even earlier than that. He was a big part, like, he was phenomenal as a prosecutor. So, she does have that ball in her court. She
Mhm.
has a pretty in terms of defense attorneys, I'm sure she's gonna be a pretty great one.
I
And
mean, listening to him speak already, just the way he comes off impassioned is engaging.
mhm,
Just no matter
mhm.
what, he could be lying his ass off, and he's got you hook, line, and sinker while he's doing it.
I mean, all this really is, at the end of the day, who said it best.
Hmm.
I mean, yes, you have to be factual
Yep.
based on the information that you gather and the discovery, but what it comes down to is what kind of show you give that jury and the members of the individual members of that jury and how they internalize the information that they're given. We know that it's all on the prosecution. The defense just has to just plant a little bit of doubt, and it's all up to the prosecution to be like, "Oh, no, she did this. She ran him over and left him there because they had a fight in Aruba." They're gonna have to do better than that. They're going to
Yeah.
have to do better than say, "They weren't getting along, and they were flirting with other people."
Yeah.
That's not grounds for murder. I'm sorry, it's just not grounds for murder.
No, I'm actually surprised. The motion to exclude that evidence, the Aruba trip, the hearsay evidence that came with that was a close thing. Because,
Mhm,
I mean, as boring as the prosecutor Adam Lally's opening statement was on day one of trial, he's not a very strong speaker. I've
mhm,
noticed from watching him in court, but he knows his stuff.
mhm,
So he was able to get up there and very easily tie these events in Aruba to the night in question without doubt. So that motion was denied because they can't keep that out because it is not remote. Because the fight they were having in Aruba was down to Karen's jealousy of any other woman in the vicinity of John O'Keefe. She had a
mhm.
hard time. I mean, we all get jealous. It doesn't make her a killer, but
Right.
it does go to state of mind. And I think that the fact that they were able to keep it in, the fact that they were able to draw that connection between a night a month earlier, and the night of his death, it was masterfully done. So I don't think anyone should really write him off too early, but I think I'm losing that argument with a lot of folks that I talk to on a daily basis, my best friend included. It sucks.
It's going to be a long haul.
Yeah.
And I don't really know if I have the stuff to watch it every single day. I did sit through quite a bit of the Harmony Montgomery trial against her POS, biological father, who was convicted of her murder. That was
Yeah.
hard, and it's certainly very different. Long-term abuse and subsequent murder of a child is hard for any of us to take. This is very different, but it's just it's become such fodder. Can you imagine what it's like in those coffee shop conversations in these town? I mean, I live in a little town too. You live in a little town. I think Canton's probably bigger than both of our towns
Oh,
together.
way bigger. Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
really remember what
The
their
beginning of this madness. And I'm like, wow, your police department is huge. Holy crap. Like, their town is more spread out than mine or yours. I don't know where you're from, but I mean, the town I live in has been the subject of your podcast more than once,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? That keeps coming up, by the way.
I'm not surprised. Once you start talking about it, it's not going
keeps
to go
coming
away.
up.
Yep.
Somebody reached out to me and said, somebody that was part of the investigation wants to talk. And I'm thinking, I didn't wanna spend all this. I mean, you and I are gonna talk about a missing child from that
Yes.
area, and we're still gonna do that. And there are
Yeah.
other unsolved cases in that area that we're gonna talk about.
Mhm.
But this Daniel LaPlante case keeps coming back to me, and I had absolutely no intention on spending that kind of time on that, what I believe was a serial killer in the making. I believe that Daniel LaPlante was on his way to being he was a very disturbed individual, proven because he's in prison for his crimes. But it's bananas that case keeps coming back. But we have other things to talk about in that region. But yeah, somebody that was investigating that case wants to talk. I'm like, okay, let me think about it. I don't know. I'm busy right now. I can't really dig into that rabbit hole, but
it's everywhere, Angel. It's everywhere. I was in Townsend a couple of weeks ago, the day that I dropped in on the chief of police. I had a day off from work and I was just like, hey, bud, ready to talk? He was not. So I just kind of drove around looking for something to do. And I love the antique shops in West Townsend. So I went and I started talking to a guy who runs the shop on the second floor. And he was one of the auxiliary police officers who assisted in apprehending Danny LaPlante.
wow.
And he told me about he was present when they found him at that dumpster at the Moore Lumberyard in Air.
Wow.
He was there. And I'm like, how is this case still hanging over this town? It's insanity. He's everywhere. Like this black cloud that just hangs over the whole area. You can't escape it. It's a legacy and it's terrible.
And family members still live there, from what I'm told.
Yep.
His family still lives in the same house that they lived in when he was murdering people.
Yep. I did actually a little tour that same day of what would have been Debbie Quimby's bike route. And you passed his house on one of the potential routes because he lived on West Elm Street. So
I did that drive. Yep. And then I went up Saunders.
Oh, you went up there?
They
don't take kindly to people going up that street.
I did.
And you notice the house is right across the street from the mouth of Saunders.
Yes, it is.
Bananas.
The blue house is right there at the entry. You turn, depending on what direction you're coming from, left or right. Her house is right there, that blue house. The Saunders house, which was the Gustafson's home where the family was killed, was the same for decades.
Yeah,
Whomever owns it now is completely changing the look of that house.
they should. It just kind of puts more of this to rest, It takes what is probably a somewhat macabre tourist attraction in town and just sort of says, well, we're reclaiming this. We're taking it back. Mhm.
Yeah, I did. I was there for I know what we were doing. We do a lot of real estate drive-bys,
Oh, cool.
and we were looking at houses that were for sale. We do that a lot.
Love that.
Whether we're intending on, if we're seriously thinking about buying the house or not, we go and we
Oh,
look at real estate a lot
okay.
to see what your money gets you in these different towns.
Yes,
That's why we were there.
exactly. You get a little more bang
Um,
for your buck up here
I
than you would
know.
a little closer to Boston, but
I
it's a
know.
long commute.
Yeah.
We're pretty remote.
I think we probably answered this question already, but what do you suspect is going to happen? How do you think
Um,
this is actually gonna shake out?
Boy, as it stands right this second.
Like, how do you what's your gut with what you? Because I'll tell you what I think.
Mhm.
What does your gut tell you right now based on the things that you've known previous to this and just what you've seen play out in just 2 days of court?
Oh, I based on what I've seen in the last 2 days in court, I think she'll be acquitted. I'm very interested to see what happens when the experts come in. I want to know because I mean the prosecution has an expert from Celebrate who wrote the extraction software
Mm,
that says this 227 Google search did not happen. And then the defense has this very revered data expert named Rich Green who says, yes, it did. So I want to know who comes off more believable on the stand. For my money, the guy who wrote the program is the preeminent expert in the program and interpreting the data that comes out of it. So honestly, I think that they'll have a pretty tough time making the jury understand what actually happened with that Google search. So that I think is what it hinges on for a lot of people.
in the Google search you're referring to is how long does it take someone to die of hypothermia or whatever the language is?
How long to die in the cold?
And what's the discrepancy? There was one report says that it was very early, like middle of the night, and the next one, there's one report that says it was once Karen showed up and realized that he was dead or dying, said, "How long does it take?" or something. There was an
Google
order
this.
from Karen
Yeah.
to look it up.
Yep. So there's one search that supposedly occurred at 2:27 in the morning,
Mm.
the night of, well, the very early in the morning of January 29th. And that was stored differently. Like, I don't know how far into the minutia you want to go here, but like essentially in layman's terms, because I don't know any other way, because I'm not a data expert, but essentially the search that occurred or did not occur at 2:27 was searched in a temporary file. So it's called WAL, it's write ahead log storage. So that's what happens if you Google something, hit search and go, oh shit, no, and close it real fast or shut your phone down. The other search that happened at like 6:23 or and 6:24 in the morning, those were stored in the long-term Safari log, like the database storage, essentially. So there's a hard record of it, but there's no hard record of 227. So the battle here is whether it actually occurred or didn't at 2:27 in the morning. And if it did, if it truly did happen at 2:27 in the morning, Jen McCabe has a lot of explaining to do, like a lot, because that to me, spending a year going back and forth, she's guilty, she's innocent, she's guilty, she's innocent, that has been a major sticking point because you can't go all the way one way with something huge like that sticking in your mind.
And I think you're right. It's going to be a matter of, I mean, certainly there's a lot that's gonna play out between now and the 6 to 8 week journey that we're all gonna be on together for those people who are paying any kind of attention to the John O'Keefe murder trial that's going on. It's going to be interesting to see how it works for the jury. I mean, we've
Mhm.
seen this a lot with DNA science. So many, citizens have that CSI effect, right?
Yes.
They think they
Yep.
understand how all of that science works when it comes to crime and homicide, but it's not like it is on
It's not black and
television.
white like that.
And I know that this comes up a lot in trials like this, that it's difficult to try to put these things into terms where you're facing a jury of your peers, right? It's supposed to
Mhm.
be just like everyday people, your neighborhood, but everyday people in your neighborhood don't understand things to the same way. So
Yeah.
when we talk about this technology about, well, it's stored one way this way and it's stored one way this way, it's a matter of who can tell their story the best to make it palatable for the jury to figure out and internalize, and then when they go to deliberate, how much of that becomes a part of it. I think you're right. I think
Mhm.
that's one of the things. Certainly, we have a long way to go, but that's
Mhm.
one of the things that's going to come up. So what is it? Was it 2 a.m., middle of the night?
Right.
Or was it after 5 a.m. when Karen was like, "Oh my god, no, 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 what
Yeah,
happened?"
where is he? He's
Yeah.
never not come home. Where is he? And I think another, I mean, at least from where I sit as somebody, again, who's been following this for a long time, Karen's multiple accounts of what happened are very problematic. Probably will go down in her mind as the worst night of her life. No, I
Mhm.
mean, there's a certain amount of shock, there's a certain amount of desperation and despair involved with losing somebody you care about very deeply, regardless of how you lost that person. But I mean, at the outset, she's saying, I dropped him off and I drove away. I don't know. And then on Dateline, she says, I dropped him off and I watched him go in the house and then I drove away. Where did
Mm.
that come from? We don't know.
Mm.
We have her arraignment where David Iannetti says this was just a tragic accident. She'd been drinking and it just happened. Okay, where was that? I mean, there's 5 or 6 different accounts coming out in the evolution of this third party culprit defense that they've been building for a year. And I mean, they are sowing those reasonable doubt seeds. But if you watch her, if you listen to her talk, you're like, wait, which is it, Karen? Which is it? Did you see him go in? Do you not even, one account, she doesn't even remember leaving the bar. She doesn't
Mm. And
remember leaving the bar
she was driving a car.
with a bunch of cops. That's also a big problem for me, too. I mean, you're out with a whole bunch of police officers, whether
Mm.
they're local, Boston, state,
Yeah,
whatever. I mean,
yeah.
law enforcement is big in that group. She was supposedly trashed off what now the prosecution is saying is 9 drinks. She is teeny. So 9 drinks in this tiny woman, and you're going to let her get behind the wheel of a car?
That poses so many questions for me
Yeah.
because, I mean, I'm gonna remind everybody through the course of this whole thing is I haven't been following this very closely. I will tell you,
Okay, I'll help
I
you.
have not been following it very closely. That's why we're talking. So people are probably like, "Yeah, but Angel, what about this? What about that?" I'm gonna tell you, I haven't been following it very closely.
And I envy that.
What in the world? Clearly, she's been interviewed a number of times.
Yeah.
I would have to guess. Clearly, I would
Mm,
say everybody in that house was interviewed, but that's not the case, is it?
no, not at the outset. That's
Yeah.
also a very large problem because
Mhm.
the initial police report about this had a list of people in the house, and most of their names were spelled incorrectly or they were left off the list entirely. I mean,
Interesting.
Colin Albert wasn't on the list.
Interesting.
Yep. And then we have body cam footage of Karen in the police department when she was arrested. saying Colin Albert and Brian Albert beat the shit out of him and left him for dead. And I was like, why are you blaming a child? Yeah. Like, that to me has always rung very, very false. Like, I'm sorry, I just don't buy it with Colin Albert. I don't see it and I don't like it. That's where I left. That's where I got off the Karen Reed train a little bit and said, okay, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm going to just step back and reevaluate everything that I know to be factual and just ignore all the noise. And everything that I know that happened, that we know from evidence or from multiple witness accounts, that's what I'm taking into account. And the witness accounts that I've heard are that Colin left the house. He wasn't there. So why are you blaming a child for this? I mean, just leave him alone. They ruined his life.
There's a lot of ruin here. So the home in Canton where John O'Keefe was found, that family no longer lives there, correct?
Mm-hmm.
They no longer have their family pet.
The pet thing is a little bit of an issue to me too.
That's questionable to me because I have dogs.
Yep, me too.
I couldn't for the life of me deal with relinquishing my pet to somebody else. And again, I don't know the ins and outs of that family's history. Like, I don't know very much about their case. I don't know very much about their living situation. I try to think this way. This is how I try to operate when I see someone who's surrendering their dog, because I don't know what their family situation is. They could have some financial breakdown. They could have, a massive change in their world. They could have a illness, divorce. I don't know. I try to withhold that judgment. Somebody's dead. It's a little bit more difficult to withhold the judgment when it comes to, well, there's a dead man in the yard. Something happened. But then when you try to suspend your disbelief, it becomes very difficult because you've had all of this chaos, surrounding this case. I call it like the pig pen effect, right? Remember the kid on the Peanuts? That you see this kid, he just has like this cloud of dirt around him. Like that pig pen. And I also call people who are like really toxic and messed up, like, oh, that's a pig pen of like bad energy. But there's so many questions about that family, and they moved out of the house and they no longer have the dog, and why not? And what happened with John O'Keefe and Karen Reed, and they were bar hopping, which everybody does that. But then if they were supposedly chug-a-lugging booze, they're driving. I mean, is that why she gave him a ride to the party? She didn't want to go to the party. He did want to go to the party.
He was out drinking with friends at C.F. McCarthy's before she met him there, and they moved over to the waterfall with the Alberts and Brian Higgins. He had a friend pick him up. So he didn't have a car downtown. So I don't know if the plan was for her to meet him. I've heard conflicting things about that. Either his friend was going to drive him home or he was going with Karen. But either way, he was not driving that night.
And we are led to believe that she had a bunch of drinks. And she may or may not remember the events of that night. Like you have said, her story has changed a few times.
Yeah.
And stress could bring that on. I mean, I'm trying to offer some compassion for everybody involved, because there is a dead man. That affects a great many people, including the 2 children that he became responsible for, who suffered a great deal of loss. And I think about them all the time and how this plays out for them. There is a possibility that she is not responsible for this. So she's mourning. She is in the fight of her life. She has become an unwitting celebrity of this strange notoriety that she has been sort of propelled into this bananas spotlight.
And there's some argument out there as to whether she put herself there or not. But it's worth mentioning that there are significant allegations of conspiracy between her and Aidan Carney to put certain information out there into the public and withhold other
Mm.
pieces of information that maybe don't paint her in the best light. I cannot speak to that, but it's worth mentioning that those allegations exist.
We really don't have any way to know if this will happen or not. But
Mhm.
do you suspect that Karen Reed will take the stand in this trial?
No, I don't think she will. The way that she conducts herself in court is this, the persona she's trying to put forward is this strong, silent, almost sort of put upon, I'm the
Mm.
victim sort of thing. And I truly think that that cannot be preserved. I don't think that she would do a very good job on her own behalf on the stand.
Well, if she has a hard time controlling her facial expressions, she may not be grace under pressure on the stand.
No.
I would be surprised. I mean, knowing what we know about defendants who have taken the stand, it doesn't bode very well for them. We've seen it a number of times. It does not bode very well for them. And
Nope.
I don't know that I mean, she gets accused of a lot of things, but I don't know that she's this, straight up narcissist that feels like she can take the stand and like snow everybody and just come out completely
Smelling like
blameless.
roses. I do think that they are still underestimating the prosecutor.
Mm.
I don't know much about his track record, but he's been doing the job for quite some time, and I know that he can't have lost every case he's worked on.
Yeah.
I know he does have a strategy here, and I think that if she does take the stand, it would be because they are massively underestimating Adam Lally. But then
Mm.
again, he does trip over his words a lot, so who knows? I
Mm.
mean, you're watching these people on court TV in the background rolling their eyes whenever
Mm.
Adam Lally talks, and you're just like, okay, before this, you make coffee for a living. Like you don't know what the fuck you're talking about
Right.
when it comes to the law. Like,
I have
stay in your lane, dude.
I
Come
saw
on.
this line on the internet. Everything is a conspiracy if you don't know how anything works.
I like that. Going back to the case though, I mean, you have to think about how far reaching this conspiracy would actually have to be in order for everything that these people are saying to be true. You're involving the district attorney, you're
Yeah.
involving the US attorney, you're involving the FBI. The FBI really is going to get involved in the fringe job of some nobody from Massachusetts. Like, who cares? No. I think it was a simple case of ineptitude on the part of Michael Proctor. And I think that she hit him by accident. I think that she was drunk and ragey and she backed into him and then drove away and blacked out and forgot about it. I think that's what happened because that is Murphy's Law. Or
Mm.
Occam's razor, sorry, not Murphy's Law.
What do you make of all of these? I mean, again, because I don't know. I haven't spent any time researching. I know like top level shit. It was a snowy day in January, and I know it's very cold, and there was this accident or not accident, and she's Karen Reed, and he's John O'Keefe, and he was a cop, and she wasn't, and the people in the house were, I don't have a deep understanding of it to connect the dots, so that's why I'm sort of playing catch up with the case as it rolls out day to day, but I
I
can't
think that's the best way
I
to
can't
do it, though.
invest that I can't really invest that kind of time in this because of all the things you just said. Yeah, it's important that somebody died probably by accident. I don't
Yeah.
know. Was there this big Canton slash state police slash Boston? Because let me clarify that. The person's house that it happened at was also a Boston cop, right?
Yes,
Not a Canton cop, a Boston cop.
right. His brother is a Canton cop. He is a Boston cop.
So the relationship between the two Boston cops, what has the conversation been about those two? Whose house it was
Between
at?
Brian Albert, the homeowner,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
John O'Keefe, the
Mm-hmm.
victim. Just a courteous, hey, how you doing once in a while. And they weren't friends. They didn't know each other. John was neighbors with Brian's brother, Chris. So they knew each other. And there's some discrepancy as to whether there was bad blood between John and Chris and thereby Colin, who is Chris's son,
Mm-hmm.
or whether they were friendly. I've heard from one side of the fence that they were very good friends. And then I've heard from another side of the fence that there was terrible bad blood and grudges between the two. So who do you
Mm-hmm.
believe?
So, and that leads me to the next question. I saw a testimony of family members in the first couple of days. And the
Well,
testimony was that they liked Karen and they were
mhm.
friendly and they were hoping that if with the sister-in-law said, Karen said, if anything happens between John and I hope we can still be friends. How do the family members feel about Karen Reed today?
That's a weird thing too, because to hear them tell it on the stand, they, at the time, the day of, were just as confused as everyone else. They weren't pointing fingers because they didn't know what happened. They treated Karen the same as they had always treated her. Can I come over and see the kids? Of course you can. But now I think that there is a definite problem between the Reed family and the O'Keefe family. I've seen with my own two eyes some tension brewing between John's brother Paul and Karen's brother Nathan.
Mm.
So, given the situation, can you really blame that tension at all?
And because everything's been spun up in the media, they haven't been able to properly mourn.
Nobody has. And that's the biggest tragedy out of all of this is John lost his life and nobody who was close to him, cared about him, loved him, was able to properly grieve his passing because of this sensationalism surrounding Karen's case. I think my biggest problem with this is that when people talk about it in the vernacular now, it's called the Karen Reed case. It is not
Yes.
the Karen Reed case. She is not the victim.
Yeah.
The John O'Keefe case. He is the victim. And his name should be the one that is synonymous with this because you should be worried more about getting justice for him, whatever that looks like, and whoever's to blame.
And I will say this to piggyback what you just said. If Karen Reed did not do this, she needs justice as well. If she's innocent, I hope for justice for her too.
Yeah.
I simply can't. No.
I mean, if she is innocent, can you imagine? Can you imagine going through all of this as somebody who has done nothing wrong? But on the other side of the coin, look at all the other people whose lives have not only been affected but been tarnished forever because of this. I mean, Jen McCabe, whether she Googled something or not, she is a mother. She is a citizen of this town who has been vilified over this when she may or may not have done anything wrong. Chris Albert, there's conflicting reports about who actually owns the pizza shop, but there have been rumors that he's going to have to shut down. He's lost a business because of this. Colin Albert had to drop out of college because he's so distraught about being accused of murder. But like, I don't know, these people could be guilty of, luring John O'Keefe into this house and murdering him horribly for whatever reason. To me, I mean, I know when you're looking at a case like this, motive should be the last thing that is considered. Means and opportunity are always first, but motive to me is important. Like, if this occurred by accident, if Karen hit him by accident, that to me sews it up. That's closure. It was an accident. They were having a fight. She was drunk. It was an accident. But if he walked into that house and these people surprised him and beat him to death, why? That's what I want to know. If that is what happened, and I'm not saying it isn't, I'm just
Right.
saying,
They have to
if that
prove it.
then tell me why.
Right.
Like, is this these rumors of bad blood, or someone was drinking at someone else's house? Like, all of these rumors, speculation, like that doesn't fly to me. I need a reason.
No, the rumors and speculation are not going to bring justice to these
Yeah,
people. To John O'Keefe, who's dead. And, I'll say it again. If Karen Reed is innocent, she needs to get that justice.
of course.
But oh my God, it's been a long, messed up road.
It
And
really is.
we've got a long couple of months left.
I've heard some rumors that there are bombshells on the defense side that, quote, you could never find her guilty after hearing these things. Now, okay, you've said that before, and I'm still on the fence. So show me something. And to me, I have a hard time saying, oh, yeah, she's 100% guilty without seeing proof. I want proof. I want evidence. I want blood in the basement, or I want, his blood on the undercarriage of the car, or I want video or something. I want a piece of evidence to tell me who did this, because people can lie. You can get 10 people to lie. You cannot get ring video to lie. You can't get blood to lie.
Is that the claim? Is the claim that he never stepped foot in the door?
Yeah. Yep. The claim by the folks inside the house is that they never saw him get out of the car, and he never came in the house.
That they didn't even know he was on the premises until the next morning when she came looking for him?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of folks that testified that they saw her car out front when she pulled up, but they never saw him get out, and she just drove away. But their story has changed also. I mean, some people's original statement to the police was that they saw her do a 3-point turn and leave the way she came. And there's no tire tracks to point to that. So they revised their story to say, oh no, she just drove off. And it's like, okay, can you just fucking tell the truth? And then we can decide based on what actually happened. Like, why is truth serum illegal? Can we just do that, please? I'm having a hard time still following it with all the changing stories and all of it. It's a headache.
I just think about backing out, and I don't know, I never drive fast enough when I'm backing out. Definitely not in a snowstorm.
No.
To have enough velocity to kill somebody, even accidentally. The impact that I would imagine you would need to hurt someone to the point that they could fall over, be knocked unconscious, bleed, right? Because he had abrasions. He had a lot of abrasions. I'm just thinking about just basic wheel spinning, leverage in the snow kind of situation. Like, is it possible, drunk or not, for her to have hit him with such impact to get the result that we have? He got knocked out. He suffers from hypothermia because his body temperature drops rapidly through the course of those hours.
However many.
She finds him. We haven't gotten to the point in the trial where they determine. We haven't talked to the medical examiners yet. So that will be revealed.
Yeah.
That's going to be a very interesting reveal. And maybe we're going to have to set a date to revisit, and then like maybe next week we can if you want to, maybe next week we can kind of go over what we've learned.
Oh, I love it.
Because I really think that, again, I'm going to say this again for people who are listening. I don't know very much about this case. For those of you who listen to Crime of the Truest Kind, I fall so far into the rabbit hole. I'm like in the center of earth researching stuff, or at least I try to. I have not done that with this case because I simply did not want to fall into this media circus that it has been.
Mm-hmm.
The heart of everything that I do is about the victim. I pride myself, I've learned this over the course of the years I've been doing this. I wanna be victim-centered, and
Yes.
this is about John O'Keefe losing his life. Something happened that night. Will we ever really conclusively find out what happened that night? I don't know. I really didn't wanna be a part of that toxic pig pen of craziness on the internet. I suspend my disbelief a little bit when I listen to some of this because I don't have the level of knowledge of the case. But I will say that it'll be very, very interesting for me, and I'm sure you and a lot of other people who've been following this case to any degree, when the medical examiner gets on the stand and starts describing
I can't
the
wait.
condition of John O'Keefe. I don't know the science of it. I don't know how easy it is to determine time of death when somebody's been laying out in probably sub-zero temperatures at that point in January in Massachusetts.
They have ways of doing the math that can give you a pretty strong estimate of what the actual, how long he was sitting out there. Because don't forget, he was not deceased when he was found. He
Mm,
was not dead. He was still clinging. There was no heartbeat, but they were able to get him. They were able to get a pulse on the way to Good Samaritan Hospital.
mm,
He was pronounced dead after he arrived at the hospital, but he was not, for all intents and purposes, formally declared deceased until like 8 in the morning.
mm.
There's a little time there. I am very interested to hear what the medical examiner has to say about the abrasions on his arm. Because even listening to one of the EMTs testify the other day,
Mhm.
it was strange because he claimed these injuries were on the upper part of his arm. But you look at the autopsy photos and it's clearly his forearm. So which is it? Is your memory wrong? Or maybe there were injuries that are not visible on the photos that people have been sharing. And by the way, that's disgusting.
Mm.
First of all and foremost, you should not be able to find someone's autopsy photos on the internet.
No.
It's
Did they get
fine.
leaked by someone on the internet?
Yeah. Yeah, you
Gross.
can find them like without a
Mm,
problem.
mm,
And the argument is those are dog bites and scratches. And on the other side of the camp, it's no, that's from the jagged tail light when he was hit, and or the scratches from the undercarriage of her car, or something that he hit while he was rolling across the lawn. Like, you just don't know. But to hear the medical examiner talk about what these cuts or scrapes or lacerations or whatever the hell, like, to hear this person actually define these injuries in real terms, I think we'll put a lot of that to bed.
I completely agree with you, and then I have the question floating around in my head, like, has there been any conversation about maybe they existed before January 29th and what they would have been from?
I think the fact is that the shirt that he had on, the long sleeve shirt that he had on, also had those cuts in it.
Mm,
So it
I see.
was, I guess it's been determined that they happened at the time. But the
Mhm,
big question mark to me is that head injury. I want to know where it came from. That is a very specific type of
mhm,
head injury. Like, how does that happen from a car? I really don't know. I mean,
right.
I can see how it would happen from someone smacking him upside the head with something, sure, but
Yes.
not from a
Yes.
car. It would have to be a very specific hit from a car.
Yeah, I mean, and also, back to what I just said a minute ago, could that driver, Karen Reed, or any driver in this situation, could they have gotten built up enough speed for impact to knock him back so he would bust his head open? So many questions.
Will we ever know?
Will we ever know?
I don't think we
And
will.
the O'Keefe family, they have to be running that whole cycle of emotions, anger and disbelief and grief and sorrow and more anger and, wanting to shut out the world.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, they don't get to truly, really mourn their kids,
Mhm.
because they also lost a daughter. They have these little orphan children who are now, not adults, but close to adult.
Yeah, they're teenagers now, and it's devastating. I mean, can you imagine what that must be like to lose your parents and then finally gain this sense of normalcy after years of mourning your parents, only to have then your surrogate father taken from you, and a woman that you maybe saw as sort of a mother figure, or at least a comforting presence. By all accounts,
Mhm.
she was wonderful with those kids. So
She was, and I think they
we're
loved
losing
her
another
too.
set of parents. I mean,
Yeah.
regardless of whether she did this or not, these kids are suffering the most. I can't imagine what it must be like to be Peggy O'Keefe, John's mother. I
Yeah.
mean, you see her face in every frame of this court footage from the other day during these opening statements. You just watch her face, because Adam Lally was talking for 10 seconds and she just burst into tears. It's awful.
They're part of a club that nobody wants to be a part of. They have a dead kid, and they have no answers.
It's awful.
And
I
it's
mean,
fodder
of
for everything. What
course.
has happened with all of these. I mean, I see it. I see all the true crimey people, doing their daily play-by-play, and hey, great for you if you've got all this time. But it's so hard to watch because it becomes their story becomes. I mean, it's not theirs
Exploited.
anymore. This isn't the
Exploited.
O'Keefe's. And you're right, when you say the John O'Keefe murder trial, it's not the Karen Reed case. Yes, she's on trial. She's the defendant,
Yeah.
but he's the one that isn't here anymore.
He's the victim. His name should be the one said most.
Yeah, well, I'll check in with you next week,
That sounds
and
good.
we'll see what happens with the trial and
Yeah.
see how
I'm
it plays out.
excited. I want to
Maybe we
see
can
some like
talk about it.
meaty testimony. I want to find some facts here. Give me some bombshells.
Well, thanks.
Awesome.
You know what's happening. She's going to fill us in.
Well, I'll talk to you
Thanks.
soon. Thank you so much.
You got it. Thank you, Dubs. We true crime folks have a way of connecting with each other, finding one another. All of the information that we have talked about throughout the course of this episode available at Crime of the Truest Kind on the show page on the website. Also in the show notes for whatever streaming platform you listen to the show. Frito, my pug, is upstairs barking, and there's absolutely nothing I'm going to do about it. You can find out more about Dubs. Dubs the Bloodhound on Substack. Dubs the Bloodhound on YouTube. The True Crime Bloodhound on Apple Podcasts. And yes, I plan to check in with Dubs next week to get an update on what's going on in the John O'Keefe murder trial. Thank you for listening. My name is Angel Wood. This is Crime of the Truest Kind. Massachusetts and New England crime stories and a little bit of history and some snark, because after all, I am a masshole. And to anybody who's listening from outside of New England, we really are good people. Follow the show at Crime of the Truest Kind, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook. Please leave a 5-star rating and review. You can listen virtually anywhere. Apple, Spotify, Good Pods. The show is up on YouTube. Become a Patreon patron. 4 tiers starting at just $1. Thank you to all the Solid Gold's wicked cool superstars, including Rhiannon, Lisa McColgan, my superstar EPs, Devin, Pam K, V Brant, Brandy, and then Devil Dog Dominique, Mark, Rebecca. Thank you for being here. April monthly mini. I know I'm a little late. It is about the 4 frozen fetuses found in a refrigerator, I'm doing that on purpose, in South Boston. And the update on that story, it's kind of bananas. Thank you for being here. Cannot thank you enough. More live shows to come. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, and lock your goddamn doors.